A very good afternoon to all. On behalf of the organizers, I welcome you to this webinar, which is being jointly organized by the working group comprising Northeast Zone, NSC Theophilos, NSC Intangible Cultural Heritage, and NSC Cultural Landscapes under the aegis of ICOMOS India. As the National Committee of ICOMOS International, which is the advisory body of the World Heritage Committee for the implementation of the World Heritage Convention, ICOMOS India provides a forum where stakeholders concerned with conservation, protection, rehabilitation, and enhancement of cultural heritage resources can meet to exchange information and views on principles and practices in the field. This program is second in the series of events proposed by this working group, a series which was proposed to celebrate the year 2022, which is the 50th anniversary of the World Heritage Convention, 75 years of Indian independence, and 10 years of ICOMOS India. Thus, to start, I invite Mr. Dilip Chand Kapoti, Northeast Zone representative and expert member of the International Scientific Committee for Intangible Cultural Heritage, to give us the welcome address. To you, Dilip, sir.
Yeah. On behalf of ICOMOS Northeast Zone, I greet all the panelists, all the colleagues of ICOMOS India, NSC Theophilos, Cultural Landscape, and ICAs, and EPWG, as well as all the audience. Our NA Zone slogan is Unfold Northeast. And we have proved it the last three webinars organized by this zone. Today, we are fortunate to have three National Scientific Committee of ICOMOS India along with EPWG come together at the invitation of any zone to collaborate in the Unfold Northeast mission. We will try to present the Northeast to the world again. You have probably heard that Northeast is a body of goddess. Everywhere the goddess exists. In other words, there is a sense of Laisho power everywhere in the Northeast. Therefore, we are shy to express ourselves to others. We think it is a joke when people from abroad come and prize in front of us. That is why we are adverse to self-promotion. We find it difficult to display ourselves. Our people are characterized by simplicity, good manner, soft phonetics, soft word, simple way of life, and others. This region, on the other hand, differ slightly from the mainland of India. Therefore, Bharat Muni includes us in the Uddramagadi instinct. This is very different from Aryabhatta and Deccan region. The Northeast region has experienced many major earthquakes. Therefore, very few permanent houses survive in this region. Here, the people make their homes with readily available natural materials. They build their houses with bamboo, wood, can, grass, clay, straw, etc., as well as the natural color. 500 years ago, in the Fathia-e-Ibria, Saifuddin Talis wrote that the palace of Ahom King Swargadeo Jayadbhat Singha was beautifully built with wood, bamboo, can, hams, etc., as well as hangul haita. These houses did not last long. In the valley area, Sanghar, or house of platform, is built for flood. There are many ethnic groups in the Northeast region, including Borahi, Kochari, Thai, Ahom, Sutia, Garo, Khasi, Mizu, Manipuri, Naga, Bhutia, Khamti, Nisimi, etc., who have their own distinct heritage. We are not able to cover all these in a nutshell today. We are trying to present every heritage to the public with great care and simplicity. There is a need to carefully build position and trust in the mind of the people. Gradually, the importance of heritage preservation must be explained and educated. There is a need of install confidence and interest in the subject among the younger generation. Only then will our conservation mission be successfully in the coming days. Thank you.
Thank you, Dilip sir.
Thank you.
May I invite Dr. Reema Huja, Vice President of ICOMOS India, to give us some words of encouragement.
Reema ji has just joined. Reema ji has just joined. Yeah.
Is she here?
I think she has just joined, and Reema ji has just joined, and please repeat, Subhru ji.
Yeah, sure. May I invite Dr. Reema Huja, Vice President of ICOMOS India, office. She's in official office bearer capacity to please address our gathering today.
Dr. Reema ji.
Dr. Reema Huja.
Ma'am, actually, Reema ma'am might be having some issues with the connection because she's just leaving and joining.
So I'm trying to join again. First of all, thank you very much for having me here, and thank you for your patience in waiting. EPWG have combined together us to think very deeply on the issue of identification of the potential World Heritage Sites in Northeast India. You will, of course, have a lot more to say about the sites and be selected. I would like to focus more on what makes a site or a living tradition special, and what makes it worth, at least in our eyes, worthy to become World Heritage.
I think she's gotten disconnected again.
I'm sorry, I've just gone on to, I've changed my net so it works. I will just repeat that first bit again, that there are sites all around us. We're lucky in India to have some sites. But what is it that makes a living tradition site special? Many methods, but we look at the world around us. We have personalized assessments. We can have a system by ticking boxes that we can say is kind of more scientific than just a personal assessment. But all of this is just one aspect of how we are viewing the world around us. And we can pick on some of them. What happens when you have a country like India, where there are so many sites that choosing, record, and document becomes almost a lifelong, or as far as professional careers go, or professional degrees go, something that happens from one generation to another. So that is one thing, that how are we looking at our sites, how are we assessing them, how are we pre-assessing them even before we put them on the tentative list. Are we looking at the history of a place? Are we looking at what is exceptional in its beauty? Are we looking at its simplicity? How are we doing it in a scientific manner? But the next step, of course, is that having decided that 31 sites are unknown in, say, one part of India, where they belong to stone using tradition. Which ones do we pick? Well, of course, we don't have a choice if you are serious about your discipline. We are supposed to record and document all of these. Having done that, there is often, particularly I found that when we were looking at hill forts of Rajasthan, a lot of people who were living the local community would come and say, look at the history of this place. And they would be a little upset that the field evaluator, who cannot be from your country, didn't know Indian history. And they said, how will he understand or she understand a site? The point is, if it is meant to be of having a certain universal importance, then it goes beyond just knowing a local history. Local history is, of course, important. But what the World Heritage Site desk and field assessment areas look at are, among many things, and I won't list the whole lot because you have the list before you, or you can use Auntie or Uncle Google to get the list. But they will look at, for example, the legal protection that can exist or is already existing for a site. So if you're talking about, say, the living bridges, and it is something that the community recognizes, then they will say, do you have more which are perhaps legally protected? They may be, they may not be. They will also look at the state of conservation of that particular site. They will look at this term that we've all learned to live with, but it may not be. So if we start unpacking the word, outstanding universal value, because there's a very loaded term, and what in my eyes can be outstanding in its eyes may not be so outstanding, but the point is universal and value. So there again, that is where the histories of a place, that is where the architecture of a place, that is where a lot more of the aspect of, say, the country we want to talk about comes into their UNESCO ICOMOS system of assessment. And we need to take all of this into account. We need to justify why we are picking one out of those 50 Paleolithic stone using sites that I hypothetically referred to a few minutes ago. Why that one? Why not the others? Or if we are doing a serial nomination, why only those 5? How do they compare with other known sites within the country and outside the country? So my little footnote here before I go on to my next point is, I always keep feeling that it's a pity we can only pick on a few sites. And we don't have a larger body of saying sites of exceptional value. That is a different matter altogether. We are talking about UNESCO World Heritage Sites. So we play by the rules if we want that inscription. We can also have our parallel lists, but really looking at World Heritage Sites, what is justifying that inscription that we want to have? What is the comparative knowledge that we have? What is the comparative analysis that we can have for one site that we are putting forward as requiring, as needing to be World Heritage? We feel it's worthy to be on a tentative list. And several of our people present today have worked on lists, but for those of among the students or others who may not have worked on the list now and will later, you need to be put on the tentative list, or a site does, not an individual person, not you or me, but a site needs to be put on the tentative list for UNESCO for that country, which is called the state party, before you can be considered, the site can, again I keep saying site can be considered worthy of being taken up and a nomination dossier made. So we have to take all of this into account before we can even write up and submit our dossier. So in the case of India, as I said in my opening sentence, there is no shortage of things that are worthy of being documented and put forward, no shortage of there is an extreme problem when we come to, so they when I don't want to talk to them now, of public awareness, both aspects. So we also, in our rest of our discussion today, we need to keep this in our mind, that it is not just enough to have a site or a series of sites that can go in a serial nomination and say, why is the world not considering this? That is very valid. Why is the world not considering something it doesn't know enough about? Because they should know about, the rest of the world. These are all exceptional, creative human creations. But we also need to work with public awareness. And fortunately, there is, sorry, if it sounded like unfortunate, I'm repeating, and fortunately, there is a lot more public awareness now. And there are a lot more people who are willing to work with community awareness and get them on board. So my final sentence to you all is our focus needs to be on both identifying sites or potential World Heritage sites in Northeast India, and along with that, getting the community to work with us to have those sites put on the list and to protect those sites even if they are not put on the list. I would like to thank you all for having me here, for your patience, even though my net kept coming and going and waiting for me. And once again, I think it's brilliant the way all of you have been, particularly the group that has come together, the Northeastern Zone, but the NSCs for Theophilos, cultural landscapes, intangible cultural heritage, and of course, all the organizers today, but our EPWG group. We are doing a remarkable group, work together. And I think together we can have the potential WHS sites of not just Northeast India, but more parts of India brought into the limelight. So collectively, good luck to us all. And from me, a very sincere thank you for having me here. Thank you. Thank you, Shubhu.
Thank you, Dr. Huja. Thank you very much. I would just like to take 5 minutes to introduce this program. What is the intent behind it? When we were discussing as a working group, as stated before already, the year 2022 is actually special for several reasons. And all are very important anniversaries. And together they provide us the opportunity to reflect and introspect our conservation approaches and achievements, especially with respect to the principles of World Heritage Convention and for their rooting in the Indian constitutional provisions for meaningful actions on ground. So to address the key objectives represented by the aforementioned events together, this second program looks at the unique potential of World Heritage properties in the Northeast India, a region which needs to receive greater attention for heritage protection and management. We just heard Dr. Huja and what essentially this particular program is trying to do is actually, I would not just say create awareness, but to actually within the professional community even understand, which Mr. Chankakoti also spoke about in his addresses, that we don't really know much about this particular region before we even start thinking of, the procedural problems of nomination or inscription as World Heritage. And this region is very very, very special, very, very unique, and I'm going to talk about it. So this region actually needs to receive greater attention for heritage protection and management. Of course, we all know there are 7 states in Northeast: Assam, Meghalaya, Mizoram, Nagaland, Tripura, Arunachal Pradesh, and Manipur. And into the NER, Sikkim was officially added in 2002. So this program actually emanates from the base that there is an absence of representation of this region for World Heritage, and to improve this is our objective of today's program. So our discussions among the working group members have made evident the uniqueness of this region and surmising some of the reasons for its neglect. So for this particular program, we are going to present to you some of the unique cultural typologies of Northeast, which we do not really see elsewhere in the country, and which, of course, nowhere else in the world, which need to be taken up for further development of proposals for inscription as World Heritage, and of course, for their proper protection and management. Just to recapitulate what actually makes Northeast different from the rest of the country. Of course, I'm from North India. My information so far emanates from what I'm reading. The other participants here from this region, I would request them to pardon me if I'm missing something, and to help me correct some points in case there is some issue. Hello? Yeah. So unlike the rest of the... Sorry, is there... So actually 98% of this region's border is international, with neighboring countries of Bhutan, Tibet, Myanmar, and Bangladesh. And this region actually, if we look at the ethnic and cultural traits, it sees kind of an amalgamation of Southeast Asians, the Burmese, the mainland Indians, and also some aspects of Chinese ethnic, influences. Very importantly, this region is shaped, this cultural identity and distinctness is actually shaped by its physical and environmental context, where we have the Eastern Himalayas and the Patkai Bum mountain ranges, which goes towards Myanmar, that connect yet separate the Northeast from the Eastern and Southeast Asia. So this is the part of the country that is very well connected with, the eastern part of the continent, which is essentially a mountainous landscape with lots of peaks and a lot of valleys, and of course some flatlands. It is characterized by the tumultuous Brahmaputra and a comparatively calmer Barak river systems, which dot the entire landscape with streams, and of course creating abundance of water and fertility throughout the region. The climate, of course, is as is understood for a mountainous system. We also have some of the highest rainfall areas in the world here. In this region, we all know about Mawsynram and Cherrapunji. So where the human settlements, these are harsh living conditions, where human settlements show the resilience and living in consonance with nature and the natural factors. There is a huge richness in the biodiversity, flora and fauna. We already have 2 World Heritage Sites, natural World Heritage Sites from this region, Kaziranga and Manas. The Naga Manipuri Chin Hills moist forests is actually recognized by WWF as a global 200 ecoregion, which means what is an ecoregion? It's essentially a relatively large unit of land containing characteristic set of natural communities that share a large majority of the species dynamics and environmental conditions. So in these kind of situations, people have learned over the ages how to live symbiotically with nature and natural aspects around them. Majority of them are tribals. There are around, the figure may be contested. A research paper on Francis and Taylor was talking about 145 tribes, like Adis, Apatanis, Garo, Kasi, Jaintia, Bodo, Mishang, Lepchas, Bhutias, Tripuri tribes. So there are a large number of tribes who are forest dwellers, with their own unique customs. Every group has its own customs and practices. And unlike the history of the rest of the country, there have been local dynastic rulers of this region, which makes it different from the political past of the rest of the country. So there are more reasons to explore, more details to be filled in. And as we are going to see in our further presentations, that there are actually very unique cultural typologies which we do not actually see elsewhere, like the satras. We see the root bridges. There are sacred groves. There is a manifestation of even the major religions like Hinduism and Buddhism, which are interpreted in a different manner in this particular part of the country. Just to give a very short note on what has actually been done by the government of India to include sites from the Northeast for World Heritage. So in 2012, there was a committee constituted, which was called Advisory Committee on World Heritage Matters under the Ministry of Culture. And in 2012 itself, a task was initiated to update the tentative list. So tentative list is the first step towards inscription, which becomes a waiting list to be of all the sites which have a potential of World Heritage, and for which we then need to take up preparations and work for their nomination and further inscription. So there was a gap analysis that was done, and it was realized that Northeast was one of the most neglected zones apart from the the Chota Nagpur Plateau in the country. And apart from the two sites which were already inscribed, there were only two sites on the tentative list, Majuli and the Namdapha, which is a natural property. So there were 6 zonal workshops that were conducted all over the country, one very specifically for Northeast, which was a consultative process with the state governments, the professionals and academic institutions of the region for suggestions of the sites that they think have World Heritage potential. Now, of course, this was a standardized exercise conducted for all parts of the country and not really customized as per the peculiarities or, the uniqueness of each region. But it has to be seen as only the first step. Because the tentative list can be revised as many number of times, every year it can be revised. So that workshop was an eye-opener because we received proposals of about 68 sites and serial nominations. Like there was an inclusion in the sari weaving cluster series. When we looked at across the country, there were lots of sari weaving centers that we found, and one was from Northeast, which was Sualkuchi, which has now been included in that series. Some of the sites that then got included in the tentative list were the Moidams of our homes, the Thembang fortified village of Arunachal, then Kebul Lamjau, which is a mixed cultural site. Then there is Garo Hills Conservation Area, another mixed heritage sites, and then the root bridges of Meghalaya. And there are more sites that can be added annually, and I hope that there is a greater increase in the representation of these different typologies that we are going to see. So just to recap, I mean, Northeast is a unique region of India, very specifically with historic and cultural linkages to Southeast Asia and to East Asia. It has... So Northeast sites demonstrate the true spirit of Indian cultural landscapes and the humankind's adaptation of the physical environment and centuries of cultural evolution, which is unlike any other in India and of course the world. So with this as the baseline, where we are just trying to understand the uniqueness of this region, I now invite our next speaker. I'm sorry, just a minute. I would like to now invite our next speaker, Dr. M. Satish Kumar, to give us his talk, which is titled Crossing the Boundaries of Uneven Development and Territoriality, Why Heritage Matters in the Northeast of India. Just to give you an introduction of Dr. Satish Kumar, he was the director of Queen's Academy India and director for internationalization at the School of Natural and Built Environment at Queen's University, Belfast. He is a fellow, the Senator George A. Mitchell Institute for Global Peace, Security and Justice, the Royal Geographical Society, the Higher Education Academy, and the Royal Commonwealth Society. With over 32 years of experience in HE, he has previously also worked at JNU and the University of Cambridge. He has held several visiting professorships in India and the US. And he has secured UK research grants of more than 500,000 pounds and has published extensively across disciplines. May I invite Dr. Satish Kumar to please give us his presentation? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sobru, for your generous introduction. Also grateful to ICMOS India for the invitation to speak about an area that I grew up. I spent, as I said, I was born in the northeast of India in undivided Assam. Spent about 20 years in Shillong, and then moved to JNU to do my postgraduate studies. Taught there in JNU for almost 12 years, and then moved to Cambridge to teach in Cambridge, and finally been in Belfast at Queen's University for almost 23 years. During all this period, I still have worked in India, and also have made some forays into South Africa to look at some of the issues of heritage and culture. So today's talk, I would be focusing on a most recent paper that is in the press now, looking at the debates about uneven development in the Northeast, and looking at some of the challenges as to why. So based on the sort of remit provided to me by Professor Nalini Thakur in the last meeting to say something about the overview of the region, I thought it would be quite good to provide a framework following up from what Subhru has just mentioned, and also providing the context behind the Northeastern region. So I'm going to share my screen, and if you bear with me for a second, I just make sure that it is visible now. Okay, guys, I think it should be okay. Just let me know if that's visible now.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So there is, the title of my talk is Crossing the Boundaries of Uneven Development and Territoriality, and Why Heritage Matters in the Northeast of India. So the key words here is about uneven development, territoriality, that people are highly territorialized. And again, how does heritage work within these contexts? That's the sort of framework that I want to address. So I start by looking at this particular quotation from Diwani of Bengal in 1765. That's the description they made in 1765 of the Lushai Hills. And they said, the inhabitants were regarded by the few Europeans then residing in Bengal as the fiercest and the most barbarous of all the tribes within the province, notorious for their head-hunting expeditions to the neighboring plains. The object of these raids was to obtain human skulls with the object to adorn the graves of their ancestors, the belief prevailing that the spirits of the slain would become slaves of the ancestors in the spirit world. So this sort of framework that globally people knew about it. And I asked this question, there is a normalized assumption that India is what imperial colonial adventures have created. This is not the identity of Bharat. So I start with these two basic questions. What is indigenous about Indian identity? Or for that matter, what is indigenous about our cultural heritage? The second question that I want to pose is, what role do peripheral regions of India, particularly Northeast, have to play in this discourse, given that most of these places find a mention in our Vedas, in our Mahabharatas, Ramayanas, and other epics? So Northeast has always been part of our cultural constellation, and yet there is no reference to that. So we see that. So I would like to enumerate some examples. A rare example is the smoked Ahom manuscript from Assam, and that is there in the British Library. Again, it is one of the Ahom Puthis, basically discovered during the first Anglo-Burmese War of 1824-1826. Just to give you that perspective. We also have the Vrindavan Vastra, which is again unique to the region, which is lying in the British Library again, and it is almost has the same relevance as the Bayeux tapestry of King William the Orange, which is lying in Normandy. And I went to see the Normandy Bayeux tapestry, and I say, why can't we have the Vrindavan Vastra back to us in India so that we can really educate the people about the incredible sort of cultural heritage that we have from this part of the world. So, and my own work on the conservation of Puthis of Sundarbans is again very important to keep it in mind. So the issues of culture and heritage and development across India are undergoing huge transition due to political, economic, and cultural shifts. So in that sense, when we really think about it, globalization and its attendant consequences have had a major impact on the traditions and cultural heritage of communities across the world. India presents a unique amalgamation of traditions, history, and culture symbolized in the region since the pre-Aryan day eras. The Northeast follows the same trajectory, but with different pathways. Unfortunately, the pride and value are not reiterated across generations in situ and also across India. We celebrate imported Valentine's Day instead of our own cultural traditions. While Japan has made vast strides in reinforcing and ratification of the international system of protection of world cultural heritage based on the World Heritage Conventions, India's efforts have been in fits and starts like a broken engine. More recently, we have seen efforts to recognize and support exceptional skills and strategies for the preservation of tangible cultural heritage. In the case of intangible cultural heritage, we have yet to follow through on the law for the protection of cultural properties of 1950. Heritage has remained a contested domain in India until recently and requires a complete overall focus and cherishing of cultural heritage across regions of our nation state to ensure long-term sustainability and benefit. So the conservation and preservation of both the tangible and intangible cultural heritage becomes the key aspect. And as I said, I like to reinforce the NARA document of authenticity of 1994, which says the significance of conservation being directly connected to the cultural context in which the conservation is taking place. Here, the preservation of craft skills involved in such conservation restoration is of great significance. The key registers of tangible heritage are historic buildings, monuments, and artifacts. The intangible forms of songs, dances, and legends need greater articulation for enhancing ecotourist potential for the region. So, background to Northeast India, just to give you these pictures that you see here. I discovered this while when I was working and teaching in Cambridge University, and I was working in the British Library, in the old British Library, and I discovered this incredible photographs hand-painted by a British soldier on the hills of the Arakan Hills and looking down at the Shwedagon Pagoda in Rangoon, the Anglo-Burmese War in 1825. That transformation was taking place and someone was recording this image, Lieutenant Joseph Moore and Captain Frederick Marriott in 1824. I actually have made the copies of that and I'm using it just to tell you that that documentation was going on in 1824, 1825. Invariably, to date, and as I said, just to very quickly give you, I'm going to pick up some of the themes here in terms of the outline, just touch upon it and therefore provide you with the framework. So background to Northeastern region as spaces of exception, the historical geography of territorial and jurisdictional administration of NEPA, the Crown Colony, the Nexus of Territory, region, state, inner line permit, and what it means to us. So most of the imageries of this period of Northeast are documented. One can see that from 1824, 25, all the way through to 1870s, etc. You also have, excuse me, let me see if I can, yeah. Yeah. So when we look at the region itself, is seen as inaccessible, inhospitable spaces of the Northeast. There is the point that Fraser makes, talks about spatial inequity. In 1911, he says, of all the territories of India, none was less known or less cared for, and until recently, than the present provinces of Eastern Bengal. To the officials of the Bengal government, it was a place of banishment. Good administration stopped short at the Ganges. That's the sort of perspective that existed at that period of time. And I ask this question, has things changed significantly since then? So we have this, what I call the syndrome of 15 major states. Almost till date, any analysis of India is always confined to the 15 major states, and the state of Assam appears as a mere token representative of all the other remaining 7 states. The rhetoric of insurgency politics. The rhetoric of insurgency politics and the idea of shared destiny of backwardness leads all too often to a pessimistic pronouncement of the region. Northeast of India, as I already mentioned, I just want to recap, Assam and beyond includes Nepal, located beyond the Meghna River, was seen as a backward, a land of wild Aboriginal races, 1904. 8 major states of 98% of the entire border, which is already mentioned. I'm not going to repeat there. So together, the region accounts for 7.7% of the country's territory and 3.85% of India's total population and accommodates close to 160 indigenous populations. The region thus represents an extraordinary collection of ethnic, cultural, religious, and linguistic groups and diversity. And it, as I said, from southwest and Bhutan to the northeast. The region is unique because it's almost impossible for the diverse ethnic groups to conform to the one nation, one state, one territory ideal. And this is an important point to bear in mind when we look at the cultural heritage. This space was territorially carved across ethnicities and across more than one state, leading to multiple geobodies. Attempts to fix the limits of the nation state at the expense of territorial identity and creating visible geobodies have disrupted the natural alignment of the northeastern region. In the 19th and 20th centuries, colonial Assam witnessed migration from various provinces of British India, especially after the Rangoon War, followed by the Yandabu Treaty of 1826. So that gives you some sort of perspective of how this place came into existence. So when we look at the region itself, we understand that probably the most important event in the province during the last 25 years, an event moreover, which seems likely to alter permanently the whole feature of Assam and to destroy the whole structure of Assamese culture and civilization, has been the invasion of a vast horde of land-hungry immigrants. This perspective of the people coming into the region and how to protect this region became the only sort of perspective which came through in the 1930s, 1940s, and continued since then. Luckily, since the independence, things have changed, but we have to understand why is Northeast still considered to be second-hand identity? Why people in the mainland, major part of India never looks at the region as being integral part of India. And for me, that has been always a big challenge. The citizenship in a post-colonial Northeastern region continues to be fractious and challenging. So we can see that according to Sir Robert Reid in 1944, he notes in his Royal Geographical Society lecture titled, "The Excluded and Partially Excluded Areas of Assam," reiterated the establishment of the colonial spatial order of administrative boundaries, inclusions and exclusions. He drew attention to the vast heterogeneity of the region and its people in the borderland and stated, that neither racially, historically, culturally, or linguistically, they have any affinity with the people in the plains or with the people of the India proper. If they were tacked on as an Indian province, it was for natural administrative convenience. So there's a very clear divide between the hills in the Northeast and the plain communities in the Northeast. And sometimes when we talk about the Northeast, we normalize Northeast as being one singular unit. And we have to recognize that in terms of cultural heritage, we need to look at the cultural heritage in the hills of the Northeast as well as in the plains of the Northeast. Ever since its formation, the hill-plain binary remains a conundrum in the Northeastern region. Thus, the tribals in the hills were governed by customary laws emanating from traditions and culture, and the heritage emerged from there, whereas the subjects in the plains were governed by general laws. So when we look at the cultural heritage again, it is very important to make the distinction between the cultural heritage emanating from the hillside and cultural heritage emanating from the plains part of this region. So that again becomes really crucial to establish it. So Northeast region has emerged as spaces of exception, as I call it in my paper, Northeast region, which is really spaces of exception. The long histories and deep cultural linkages were superseded in favor of a normalized, unruly space devoid of any incentive to be developed. So the whole administration left Northeast to its own devices, never looked at how we can integrate them into the mainstream understanding of development. So again, the Indian imperial space came to coalesce with the Indian national space. So at the time of 1947, both these spaces came together to retain political dominance over the unruly peripheral territorial spaces. Indian nationalism, despite its anti-colonial rhetoric, internalized and subscribed to the Indian imperial ideology and thereby reinforced the ethos of spatial inequity in the region. This inevitably resulted in outcomes which are visible in the Northeast of endemic underdevelopment. So my sort of observations of this in terms of why it remains where it is. So at the same time, the reinforcement of the inner line permit to protect Northeastern Frontier Agency policies only helped to ensure the erasure of the territorial identity of the region. The territorial identity cuts across many states. And I think we need to recognize that the cultural heritage sometimes cuts across many states together. This region therefore becomes an embodiment of an official neglect from 1826 to the present day. These sentiments continue to this day. Indeed, Assam and the neighboring regions never recovered despite the efforts to redefine and integrate the hills and the plains, one of the big challenges we have in terms of the administration. So dismantling of pre-existing pre-colonial political systems and relationships between the plain areas and the hill polities were orchestrated with the introduction of the regulations to ensure easy access to collection of royalties and taxes in the region. Northeast India emerged as a subordinate space between hills and plains. The divide between hills and plains was demarcated as early as 1873 with the establishment of inner line permit. And I believe that when you look at the transformation, when you look at the changes that have taken place, it says in terms of administration, and I just want to very quickly pick up of the thoughts in 1844, 1865 by Major Butler, who says, government should abandon any attempt to administer the hills, considering that the official intervention in internal disputes had been a failure. Butler, in the fashion of the day, described Assam as a wild, uncivilized foreign land, and he suggests that to those accustomed only to the comforts of civilized life, or to the traveler who's indifferent to the beauties of scenery, the monotony, silence, and loneliness of the vast forests of Assam will present a few features of attraction. So again, you can see the prejudices and how to protect it against these prejudices. Another point, which I don't want to go into too much details, just around the time we were coming up to the 1947 in the independence of India movement, there was a demand for a crown colony that Assam and the whole of Assam, including all the 8 states, should be incorporated into the Great Britain control. And this was mooted as a crown colony by Copeland and others, and Simon Commission gave its blessings. The whole idea was to include northwest provinces of Burma, Kachin being closely linked to Assam, Naga Hills, and princely states of Manipur into the crown colony. Fortunately for us, Mountbatten vetoed this idea and never went any further. So there is what I call the nexus of territory, state, and nation. And northeastern region is unique because it's almost impossible for diverse ethnic groups to conform to one nation, one state, one territory perspective. So again, it is extremely important to recognize how the citizenships are organized. In this area, as I said, it's highly fractious and challenging with so many tribes that are coexisting in the same spaces. There's a need for an urgent de-romanticization of the state in the context of development of India in general and the Northeast in particular. Territorial sovereignty versus national sovereignty, the imposition of national sovereignty over territories has created great instability in the region, and we are making efforts now by the government to remove that sort of uncertainty there. So again, just very quickly coming up to the overview and trying to make sure that we can understand some of the conclusions that I want to draw through. So there are themes that I would like to include for conclusion, particularly in the context of today's presentation. As I said, the area is highly diverse. So looking at issues of cultural preservation, conflicted heritage, how are we dealing with contested heritage, conflicted heritage towards building cohesive communities? We're looking at issues of capacity sharing and enhancement, the role of tourism and heritage economies. How are we looking at heritage economies development? How can we develop the economies linked with heritage and tourism? Cultural creativity and innovation is constantly taking place in these regions. Can we provide support for these? Cultural memory and intangible assets are equally important. And most importantly, the role of language and intercultural communication in the preservation of shared heritage and sustainable heritage. These are really important. Some of the most misunderstood element of intangible heritage, as I said, is the role of language and communication, and it's an integral part of cultural heritage. So let me just give some final thoughts to the points that I made. In conclusion, so transitional heritage in this region has long been embedded in the regional and continental networks of trade and migration and the ethno-nationalities with the little traditions coexisting here. The point is about the fate of tradition and cultural heritage in the wake of contemporary changes ushered in by the modernization and globalization. It's crucial to recognize that in the northeastern regions, there is a need to understand the hidden heritage relating to the Ramayana traditions, which have practically disappeared due to the intense proselytization over the centuries. However, there is clear evidence of texts from Ramayana being reflected in ancient ballads and poetries in the region right across the northeastern part. Folk tales of the region reflect the transitional heritage of ancient Indian cultural tradition, being related with a focus on great and little traditions derived from Hinduism and Vaishnavism. It will also be pertinent to identify the syncretic traditions of Islam, Christianity, and Hinduism, and their link to the heritage of the region. Again, so the loss of cultural heritage remains imminent and critical as we move forward from one generation to another. Here, the tangible and the intangible cultural heritage plays a critical role during the recovery processes. I will not go into details of every state in terms of the areas, the main heritage sites that exist. I have been involved here in the UK, looking at Liverpool and Stonehenge in the debates about delisting of World Heritage Sites. And I think we need to be mindful about the challenges we have in the context of cultural heritage and development. And I think Rima Huja made quite a pertinent point here. And I'm minded about the issues that sometimes we forget that in the quest for defining areas of unique natural beauty, we conflate natural beauty and cultural heritage together. And when we are sitting and assessing World Heritage Sites, we sometimes lose the focus quite significantly in terms of areas of natural beauty versus cultural landscapes, cultural heritage landscapes. And I think we need to be a bit mindful about that. I'm happy to have a conversation about it. Thank you very much for the time.
Thank you very much, Dr. Satish Kumar, for giving us this overview, which I hope has established, aspects of this context, which are important for us to view the heritage of Northeast. May I now invite Dr. Sanjeev Borkakoti to give us the next presentation titled Overview of the Potential World Heritage Sites of Northeast India. Dr. Sanjeev Kumar Borkakoti has authored more than 60 books on education, culture, development issues, literary criticism, philosophy, etc. His book, Majuli, Resources and Challenges, was counted by several quoters as one of the most important books of the region. He is president of Society for Srimanta Sankaradeva, an organization engaged in the promotion of Srimanta Sankaradeva's legacy. He is an expert member of the International Committee on Intangible Cultural Heritage and a desk reviewer of World Heritage Nomination dossiers for UNESCO. He is also a member of the Delphic International Council, which promotes art and culture globally. He has been conferred the Sankari Sahitya Sanskriti Award by Jorhat Sahitya Sabha for his works on literature and culture. Over to you, Dr. Sanjeev.
Thank you, Subhru. So I'll be giving an overview of the potential world heritages in Northeast India. It will be a compact picture with a picture of different sites. First, it is the Majuli Island with its century-old sutras. It is the largest freshwater inhabited river island. It was included in the UNESCO tentative list since 2004. It is there. It is famous for the Satriya Nritta, Satriya culture, the Ras festival, mask making, pot making, Bhavana, that is the famous enactment of play, the classical play of Srimanta Sankaradeva, the ethnic villages, etc. The second is the Bardwathan. It was established in 1468 by Srimanta Sankaradeva. Actually, it is the place where the entire Satriya culture was created. It was from here that Sankaradeva spread his legacy. including the Satriya dance, Bargit, etc. The full structure came into being here in 1509. The Satra system came into being at this very place, Bardwa, near Nagaon. This is the Barpeta Than. It is at Bardwa. It was established in 1585 AD by Madhavdeva. The successor of Srimanta Sankaradeva was a great poet and author, playwright. The famous Brindavani cloth, which was already referred to by Satish, was woven at this very place, which is now, the original piece is now preserved in Musée Guimet, Paris, and a replica being preserved in the Royal Albert Museum of London. With about 860 Than and Satras and more than 20,000 Nang-Ghar, all belonging to the legacy of Srimanta Sankaradeva. The socio-cultural legacy of Srimanta Sankaradeva is a major heritage in Assam. Am I audible?
Yeah, you are audible, but slides are not moved.
You're audible.
The slides.
Slides
So
are
could
not
you
moving.
put your presentation in slideshow mode?
Yeah, I have put it in slideshow.
Sir,
Yeah,
from our end, we are not able to see it in slideshow mode.
Then it will be better if you share the PPT.
Should I do that? Okay, just
Yeah,
a
yeah,
minute.
yeah. I was talking about the Sankaradeva legacy. The Sankaradeva preached the Ekasarna Nam Dharma, the Vaishnavite order, and he used cultural tools for his activities. And
So is
this,
my screen visible?
yeah, yes, the screen is visible.
And I have now put it on slideshow mode. Is it visible in slideshow mode?
Not yet. And those cultural tools were songs, dances. The dance is now known as Satriya dance. The song Bargit, and the play is Ankya play, whose enactment is known as Bhavna. So all these cultural tools were used by him for spreading his legacy. And Satish already told that spiritual legacy is very important. It is an important, intangible cultural heritage that is the identity of the people. So
Your screen is also not visible.
I have actually put it on slideshow mode. Let me just try once more.
You have to share it.
and there is not a single village in Assam which does not have a Namghar. Namghar is the worshipping hall. The worshipping hall of Ekasarna Namdharma is known as Namghar. It has a different architecture from the temples in the rest of India. Now it has come. Supru, please play it from the beginning.
Yes, sir. Just a minute. Is it visible now in slideshow mode?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yes, it is. I think you should move on to second or third slide.
Sanjeev sir, keep on telling me when to move on to the next slide.
Yeah, please move the next one. Yes, this is the Barpeta Than which I was talking about. Please go back once. This is the Bardwa Kirtanghar, where Sankaradeva was born, and this came into being in 1468. The entire Sankaradeva legacy was born here. So it's a very important place. And I put up this Bardwa Than for tentative list in the 2012 meeting. Please proceed. Next. 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 This is the Tawang Monastery of 17th century in Arunachal Pradesh. It is the largest monastery in India with 65 buildings, which can house 700 residents. It is enclosed by 925 feet wall. It was founded on behalf of 5th Dalai Lama. It is like a fort. Compulsory conscription used to be done from the Manpat tribe for this Tawang monastery. Next. This is Rumtek monastery of 18th century in Gangtok. It was rebuilt in 1966. There are original Buddhist religious art, wall paintings, etc. in this monastery. Next. Next. This is Kamakhya temple in Guwahati. It is one of the 51 Shakti Peeth. It is of 8th century. The last renovation was carried out in 16th century by Koch King and Koch King Narayan. It is a hybrid architecture. It was originally a Khasi deity. Then Buddhist worship took place here.
Jai Shankar.
And finally, it came to be Shakti Peeth. The architecture, please go back. The architecture is basically Nagari style. There's lifestyle sculpture on the outer wall. The next. This is the 10th century ruins of Vishnu temple at Bamuni Hill in Tezpur. It was built in the Nagar style. There were actually 5 temples at this place. The central one was a Vishnu temple. Next. This is Norbugang Monastery of 17th century Sikkim. The coronation of the first Sogyal took place there. Next. This is Yuksam Monastery of 18th century in Sikkim. It is associated with the founding of the state of Sikkim. Actually, these two can be clubbed and considered as a cluster. Next. This is 7th century rock carving at Unakuti in Tripura. It is the largest bas relief sculpture in entire India. According to a myth, there is a total almost 1 crore carvings at that place. The next. This is Chabimura or Chak Rakma or Chak Rakma in Tripura. Actually, it may be clubbed with the previous one together and considered as for World Heritage. This one is also very famous for the panels of rock carving on the mountain wall. These were made in the 15th century. The next one. This is a megalithic stone in Avangchia in Mizoram. According to the local people, this gives a clue to how the Mizo people arrived at Mizoram. It also indicates a lost civilization. There are actually many such megalithic structures all around Northeast. This one is very important. Next one. This is Surya Pahar in Goalpara, Assam. It is a hill, and the entire hill is full of sculptures. These were made in 9th century. And the interesting point is that the Hindu, Jain, and Buddhist pantheon are equally worshipped in this hill. There are many sculptures of Hindu, Jain, Buddhist gods and goddesses. So this is a archaeologically and historically a very important place in Assam. Next. This is Mausmai Cave near Cherrapunji in Meghalaya. It is a beautiful limestone cave. One can enter on one part and exit on another part of the hill. Actually, there are about 750 such caves in Meghalaya, and this Mausmai cave is one of the longest cave in India. There are a stalactite and stalagmite formations inside the cave. Next. This is Neer Mahal in Tripura, which was built in 20th century. It happens to be the largest lake palace in entire India. The Manikya dynasty, which used to rule Tripura from the 13th century, built this palace. It took 9 years to construct it. It was started in 1921. A British company built this palace. It is the and this dynasty, Manikya dynasty, happens to be the second longest remaining dynasty in the entire world after the Yamato dynasty, which is now ruling Japan. Second, the next slide. This is the famous Kareng-ghar in Gorgaon, Assam. It is to be the palace of the Ahom kings. It was built in 17th to 18th century. As talked about by Dilip earlier, these palaces used to be made of bamboo, wood, etc. So this brick structure came into being very late in 17th century only. This dynasty ruled Eastern Assam for 600 years, the longest in India. Next. This is also built by the Ahom kings. It is called Talatol-Ghar. It is an 18th century palace as well as a military base at Shivsagar. It is the largest monument built by the Ahom dynasty. It used to be 7 stories, 3 of them underground. The next. This is the Rang-Ghar or amphitheater at Shivsagar, built by the Ahom king Pramata Singha in 18th century. It is the oldest pavilion of Asia. This tree, Rang-Ghar, Kareng-ghar, and Talatol-Ghar, this tree can be clubbed together and considered for World Heritage. And the speciality of this structure is that the material used to be very unique. The mortar used in this construction was very special. It was a mixture of yolk of egg the barali fish, the split black gram, etc. It was all indigenous technology. The bricks were also very special. They were waterproof. The next. This is the remains of the Kochari Fort at Khaspur, Assam. The Kocharis used to be the aborigines of Assam. It is a 17th century structure. The next slide. This is also part of ruins of the Kochari heritages. It is in Dimapur, which is on lease from Assam to Nagaland. Only some pillars are there. This is the this is the famous Kangla Fort built in the 17th century at Imphal. It used to be the capital of the 2,000-year-old Meitei regimes of Manipur. Next. This is the famous Koch Bihar Palace in Koch Bihar. Koch Bihar used to be actually culturally an integral part of Assam. It was only very unfortunate that politically it became part of West Bengal. This palace was built by Koch king in 19th century. They used to rule the western Assam from 16th century onward for a long time. They imitated the Buckingham Palace while constructing this palace. Next. This vernacular architecture of Assam used thatch and bamboo. Walls used to comprise of several parts. It is known as Assam type house, which you can see on the right side. It is suitable for the seismic zone and also saves energy. Next. This is the famous Thembang fortified village of Arunachal Pradesh, which was included in the tentative list in 2014. The stone gates were constructed in 1100 AD. The walls have prayers engraved. The people there still practice barter system, so it's a very unique place. Next. This is the famous earthen mounds called Moidams in Saraido, Assam. It is in the UNESCO tentative list since 2014. Unlike the pyramids of Egypt, you can see a structure on top of that. It is called a Chochali. These mounds were actually the tomb of the Ahom kings and their families. There are more than 150 such Moidams at Saraido. This also used to be a place of worship for two tribes called Maran and a Barahi tribe. They used to worship at this place called Saraido. Next. This is the Namdapha National Park in Arunachal Pradesh. It is a biodiversity hotspot. The peculiarity is that its elevation ranges from 300 to 4,500 meters. Therefore, we can see different types of vegetations there, which are found in different climates. They are found together in this national park. It is in the UNESCO tentative list since 2014. Next, this is the sacred groves of Mawphlang, Meghalaya. The speciality of the sacred groves is that coronation of the traditional kings take place there, and also sacrifices take place there, and people are not allowed to go there. Some monoliths are also found inside these groves. Next. And in this context, I can tell you one thing. Actually, in the Northeast, all the tribes, they worship the forest. Before cutting any tree, they worship the tree. They worship the forest, and they take permission from the deity. So it's a very eco-friendly atmosphere in the Northeast.
Sorry, I'll just share the screen again. There was a minor internet glitch at my end.
Okay.
Is the screen visible?
Yeah.
I hope it's in PowerPoint mode only.
Yeah, this is the famous living root bridge, Jingkiengjri. You can see it is there are two layers. That is two-story root bridge. There are about 100 such bridges found in 72 villages in Meghalaya, and the routes used in these bridges are from the rubber fig tree. It takes 15 to 20 years for a bridge to be built. Actually, these bridges are built by human beings only. They guide the routes to go along a particular way. And this is included in the UNESCO tentative list in 2022. Next. This is the Garo Hills Conservation Area, Meghalaya. It is in tentative list since 2018. There are 2 national parks and 1 wildlife sanctuary in this conservation area. And there are very precious plants found there. The famous pitcher plant, which you must have heard about pitcher plant. It catches insects and eats it. So that pitcher plant is found there. Next. This is the Loktak Lake. Actually, Loktak Lake and some other parts are together clubbed, and it is called Cable Lamjau Conservation Area. It is in the tentative list since 2016. And peculiarity of this area, this lake and the national park is that it is a floating swamp, like vegetation take place floating on the water, and even people live there. If you go to Impal, then only you can see it. This floating swampy island is a very unique thing. Next. This is the Apatani cultural landscape in Arunachal Pradesh. It is in the UNESCO tentative list since 2014. The unique land use pattern here is that the wet rice cultivation and fish rearing are practiced by the Apatani tribe. Generally, in the hills we find shifting cultivation, but here they practice both shifting cultivation as well as well as wet rice cultivation. Next. This is the famous Swalkusi village, which was already talked about by Subru. It was this village was settled by Ahom king in 17th century, and it is a village of weavers. And these weavers are so expert in weaving that even Mahatma Gandhi praised them. Mahatma Gandhi praised the Assamese weaver, especially from Swalkusi, that they can weave dreams on cloth. It was included in the UNESCO tentative list in 2014 as iconic as sari weaving clusters. There are eight centers in that cluster. Next. This is another village. It is called Jajari village in Nagaon. It's near my place. This village is known for silk weaving. The kesapat used in weaving here is a specialty. The majority of weavers are of a religious minority. This village also was settled by the Ahom king. Next. This is the famous Bihu festival, which we have been promoting under ICICH for representative for inclusion in the representative list as a World Heritage. This festival is held for 7 days in the April month. The ICOMOS notice on has requested Assam government already to apply for inclusion in the representative list. Next. This is the Nongkrem dance festival of Meghalaya. It is known as Ka Plombang. It is observed for 5 days in November to December at a place called Smith. It's a cultural center near Shillong. Goddess Ka Blay Sincher is worshipped in this festival. Next. This is the Hornbill Festival of Nagaland. It is observed for first 7 days in December at Kisama Heritage Village near Kohima. All the Naga tribes participate in this festival. Next. This is a little about Bargit, the lyrical songs of Assam. It is a classical song. Its lyrics and the ragas were created by Srimanta Sankaradeva in 15th, 16th century. It is actually a revival of the Prabandha Git of the Vedic era. The ICOMOS notice on has asked government of Assam to pursue for inclusion of Bargit in the representative list. So this last 4 or 5 slides were about intangible cultural heritages, and the earlier slides were about tangible heritages. So these are in a nutshell what in my perception can be presented to the world outside as important heritages of Northeast, which is potential to be recognized as world heritages. Thank you.
Thank you, Sanjeev sir, for this list. And I think it's quite evident that Northeast has, a lot of cultural landscapes and especially mixed World Heritage Sites, potential mixed heritage sites, which we don't really see in a lot of places because the natural systems have altered a lot. I will now present our next presentation from Dr. Debajyoti Das, which is a special typology called the sacred groves. Dr. Debajyoti Das is an anthropologist of South Asia with a focus on the borderlands of Eastern India and the Indian Ocean world. His work he deems to be deeply interdisciplinary, bridging his training as an ethnographer with extensive use of visual media and oral sources. His current research focuses on natural disaster, migration, and sustainable development issues among marginalized littoral communities in South Asia and East Africa. His research interests lie in transdisciplinary and community-focused works, which feeds into the use of different qualitative methods and tools for action research. Due to some reasons, he could not be here personally, but he has shared a video with us of his talk, which I'm now going to play. Do let me know if there is some, if the audio is not clear. Just a minute. Could you remove the focus from my face, please? Is the screen visible?
Yes, yes, visible.
And are you able to hear the audio?
I'm not in a position to present today physically at the conference, but I would like to share my views about the sacred groves of Meghalaya through this short kind of introduction, and I would like to express my gratitude to the organizing committee as well as to Nalini Thakur and the colleagues in Northeast for giving me this platform to talk about the sacred groves and how they're important in kind of maintaining not only biodiversity but the geo-hydrological cycle of the region, but also kind of promoting the cultural aspect. The deep history of this region, which remains neglected because South Asia, particularly Northeast, remains untouched and has not been discussed much in the nationalist kind of debates. So the challenges facing the sacred groves, which are the
Sorry, is the audio, can you all hear the audio clearly?
I think you need to just a little bit enhance the. Enhance the sound.
Okay, because the audio is full from my end, I could not hear any confirmation, so I kept on playing it. Should I resume?
Yeah, I think it is fine. I think you could.
They are not necessarily unique to Northeast itself, but they can also be found in other parts of India. But they're mostly degraded forests these days. And if you look at Gadgil and Ramchandra Guha's work, you would kind of find references to sacred groves which are established in the Nilgiris and other parts of South India. But in the Northeast, particularly in the state of Meghalaya, there is a big sacred grove culture, and people still kind of maintain those sacred groves in ways that are not practiced in other parts of India. But they are kind of seriously practiced because of capitalism and the destruction of forests that is taking place because of the growth of cement factories, the charcoal, the charcoal industry, which has been a major drive towards the destruction of the local indigenous forest, and also the reintroduction of forests during the colonial period was a big challenge for the colonial state, for the local people to maintain their forest. And the other impact which has happened in recent times is the modernization and the loss of cultural values and the safeguarded forest. Forest Department's failure towards forest conservation has been another challenge, conservation without people makes little sense to me. And I think here in the Northeast, this has been a failure, as in the rest of India. Programs like the Joint Forest Management have always prioritized conservation of animals and wildlife and have paid little attention towards the communities who are involved in these activities. So the decline of indigenous belief system, particularly in the state of Meghalaya, where 90% of the population are Christians, as in many highland states of the region, that has also kind of created this barrier. Western ideas of development differentiate humans from nature. As we all know, the Cartesian politics is not helpful to develop convivial relationship with the natural world. Everything cannot be quantified as we do today in terms of ecosystem services. There are spiritual links of communities with their forests that needs to be examined. That's why there is the growing emergence of this new movement called the Right to Nature movement, and more than human spaces, which has emerged as a new way of understanding humans' relationship with the surrounding environment. So sacred groves are not just islands of conserved forest across South Asia or in other parts of the world. We have to build on these lived models to design our planetary future. The sacred groves are a tangible biocultural heritage which needs global recognition. So many villages in
So, bro, there's problem.
Yeah, sorry. I'm just going to keep my video on. I'm going to stop my video so that the bandwidth goes for the presentation. Just a minute.
Northeast itself, but they can also be found in other parts of India, but they're mostly degraded forests these days. And if you look at, we have to build on these lived models to design our planetary future. The sacred groves are a tangible biocultural heritage which needs global recognition. So many villages in the River district and the Khasi district comprise the Hini trap in the Khasi, Garo, and the Jaintia Hills are bordered by what we commonly know here as sacred groves. In many cases, this is a misnomer since they are actually enormous forests. These forests do not become sacred on their own or because of some supernatural visitation. They were sacrificed or sanctified by man through religious rites and solemn prayers, and many pleading with God, Ublay, in Khasi they call it, asking him to bless and consurrect them and charge the guardian spirit of villagers and the wilderness, Yu Ringke Dri Yu Basa, with the task of protecting and preserving them. At the root of all this is the Khasi pantheistic philosophy and their belief that God exists in all things, animals and people, within the universe. In short, to the Khasis, God is the universe and manifests most closely through nature. Therefore, the degraded nature is to disregard God, and to deprive forest of trees is to deny God his favorite haunt on earth. So the traditional Khasi belief system is very much can be considered as amnestic, but I would not denigrate the practices and the belief systems of the Khasis by saying that it's amnestic. I would say that it's more closer to nature, and it's something which we understand today as the cosmovision, particularly if you look at the Latin American literature, if you look at the Amazonians, how they kind of practice and believe, and their kind of, the Mother Earth, how they worship. It's quite distinct from how we can.
So that was the end of the video. I hope that it was audible to all. Dr. Debjyoti Das talked about the sacred groves of Meghalaya. However, this typology of sacred groves, I believe, is also evident in some other parts of Northeast. And as was told, this essentially is a culture which precedes the advent of Christianity in this region. And the tribals essentially protect this forest. This is a traditional system of protecting forests where they believe that the deity resides in these forests. And it's they live in them and they worship and protect these forests. So this is certainly a very unique typology of Northeast India. And now to continue with our second special typology of Northeast, I would like to invite architect Kritika Mohan to talk about the Satras. Welcome, Kritika. Will you be sharing your presentation or do you want me to do that?
Yes, I'll be sharing my presentation. Is it audible?
Yes, we can hear you, but your screen is still not visible to us.
Just a second.
Yes, thank you. It's in presentation mode also. Please continue.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, ma'am. Good evening, respected speakers and the participants. Today, I'll be presenting about the special typology of Northeast India, the Satras, the Vaishnavite monasteries of Assam and West Bengal. And this presentation is also part of my post-graduation thesis on Barpeta Satra precinct in Assam. And I have completed this in 2019. And for the better resolution, I will switch off my video. So the word Satra originates from the Sanskrit word called Satra. It means a sacred place where the devotees assemble to take the name of the Supreme Lord and forget their materialistic life. And it's a lifeline of Assamese culture, which was a resultant of Bhakti movement in the medieval era, when the region of Assam went through a social political turmoil and Shaktism, extreme tantricism was predominantly available. And to form a balanced society, Sankaradeva, a great saint and scholar, started this movement as Neo-Vaishnavite movement under the religion called Ek Sharana Nam Dharma, unity in diversity, that means, and it discarded all the casteism and inclusion from different religions. So Sankaradeva, along with his disciples, visited different places of Assam to spread and expand the Vaishnavite religion, with a huge contribution towards the Assamese society, economy, literature, and performing arts. So the origin of the Satra was initiated as existing terminologies called Than or Devagriha, which is a religious seating, but in course of time it emerged as a developed institution with a certain structure in a definite location. So at first, the first Satra was developed at Bordua, Nagaon by Sankaradeva with a prayer hall surrounded by the hatis, that means the residential units for the new devotees or the converted devotees. That later on, it followed by Barpeta, Majuli, and other sides of Assam. So the satras were located on the bank of the rivers for accessibility and availability of food staff. And several satras were also established within the populated areas such as Borpeta, previously known as Tatikuchi, where Sankaradeva prepared the famous Brindavani Vastra, as the earlier speakers had mentioned, and which has depicted scenes from the Bhagavad Mahabharata, mainly of the childhood days of Lord Krishna. So after the demise of Shankadeva, his legacy was continued, and the judicial management and gradation system called Samhatis, the four Samhatis called Kal, Nika, Purush, and Brahma, came up with his disciple with some difference in belief systems among themselves. And this is the time the Vaishnavite Thans were developed as Satras. So Majuli, Bordoa, Koch Bihar, and Borpeta became one of the principal satras in Assam in this period. So each satra was headed by a religious head called Satradhikar in eastern part of Assam, or Satriya in western part of Assam, followed by celibates or the married devotees, and they will be engaged in various responsibility inside the satras. And celibates will stay inside the satra premises, whereas devotees stay outside the satra premises. And the Guru text was also collected for the maintenance of the satras annually. And also during this time, you can see a largest 22 Hati residential unit system was formed under the Borpeta Satra Authority. In the 17th or 18th century, where the royal patronage was given by the Ahom kings to the Satras, so acres of land was gifted that started with as a feudal system with artisans and craftsmanship, and that is how some permanent structure such as relic shrines came up in the Borpeta group of Satras. So as you can see, a fully fledged Satra, Barpeta Satra during 18th century, which is full of surrounded the prayer hall called as Kirtan-ghar, surrounded by rows of hatis, your dole, residences for the principal receptors, and with cowshed, and that the accessibility was by a water stream called Horijan. In the talking about the 19th century, many satras were devastated by Burmese invasion. But after the capture of British armies, they took a lot of interest in rebuilding the satras, which you can see a report on the existing prayer hall section of Borpeta Satra, published in 1851 in the West Asiatic Society of Kolkata. So the new system, gradation system has been added into the old as to unite all the satras. And at last in 1990, Assam Satra Mahasabha was set up to preserve and protect the culture and tradition of all the satras. According to them, as of now, we have 862 satras, including Bengal and Assam. But few scholars noted that we have a total around 1,200 satras, which are yet to be listed. So moving on, these are the present context with the of the location of the satras. So moving on, as this is a present fully fledged Satra institution at Borpeta, and this is a site plan of Kamalavari Satra in Majuli. So if you see the architectural pattern of Satra, the Satra is marked by the existence of a Batsara, that is the entrance way to the premises, a Kirtan Ghar, or we call as Namghar also, which is the center of all the religious activities. a manikut, or we called it as bhajghar, where the main deity will be kept, and Akshay Banti, an earth lamp which must be lightened of 24 hours in a day, and it will be kept inside the manikut or the bhajghar. And also there are residential units called boha or hatis for the celibates inside the satra premises. So other than these, there are few architectural typologies, which is the oldest structure of the satra, dole, or the resting places of the celibates, called as patsang, can be found depending on the location of satras. And moving on, if we look at the living tradition and the satras, so the satra enriches our culture in a very unique way. So there is always a definite sitting arrangement you'll get to see for the celibates and devotees inside the prayer hall, offering services from the morning to evening, daily, weekly, monthly, or annually, depending upon their prayer services. We also recently conducted a webinar on devotional song called Borgit, which Sanjeev sir has spoken about. That is also a part of Satriya culture. Training of painting, sculptures, performance arts still prevalent in the Satras. So we have our in the Satra culture, we have our various cultural programs, dramas called bhavnas, your instrumental systems, handicrafts, mask making. They are the main elements of this Satriya culture. This has also influenced, it has to be noted that this Vaishnavism in the Assamese culture has also influenced in the Vaishnavism in the Manipur region as well. Also, if we look at the tradition, the condition of the residential units of the satras, basically the hatis, you are still going to see the vernacular architectural pattern in this. And within this typology, these many intangible values are associated within it. So you'll get to see the potteries, your mask making culture, your wood carving, and metal works, etc. And few of them disappeared in the warm-up time. So I won't be able to go into the more depth of the satras due to the time constraints. But from my observation, the first satra recently, Badwa Satra, recently received a new development project from the government of Assam, where you see a non-relatable transition of the satras from aesthetics to the functions. There are, I think, more listings required of existing satras, documentation in the interrelationship between the built heritage and intangible assets of the satra, including the hatis, because the more changes in the built form will affect the intangible values inside it. Many heritage structures were demolished due to loss of traditional knowledge and craftsmanship. But nevertheless, as a young generation, we need to embrace our own cultural identity in the time of extreme modernization. And we can stand by that Satra is definitely an institute of a mirror of an Assamese society. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kritika. My apologies, I forgot to introduce you before your presentation. Kritika,
No issues.
no, that's I really apologize. So Kritika, to introduce, is actually a young conservation architect belonging to Assam. She is also an EPWG member as well as representative from Northeast Zone of ICOMOS, India. She is involved in research activities, assessment and documentation of built heritage at various locations in Assam and Meghalaya. And at present, she is an assistant professor at the Oxford School of Architecture, Bangalore. Thank you for telling us about satras. And of course, we all know Majuli, which is already on the tentative list, represents this particular typology. But there is certainly a margin to actually study and really understand this unique typology of the Northeast. So thank you, Kritika. May I now now invite speakers of our next session to be made by architect Vidisha Barwal and architect Sanjeev Shankar. Sirvet, am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. We can hear you.
Okay. So the present Sanjeev Shankar, Sirvetu Bari Mariang Jingkiengjri Cooperative Federation Limited and Jingkiengjri team from the government of Meghalaya. So we are very fortunate that we have some official representation. To introduce our speakers, Vidisha Barwal is a landscape architect, currently working at the School of Architecture at Nagrota Bhavan in Himachal Pradesh. And she has been part of the Living Root Bridge team, which is working towards the nomination of this community-led management project under the Meghalaya Basin Management Agency in Shillong. Welcome, Vidisha. Will you kindly start with your presentation?
Is the screen visible?
Yes, the screen is visible. You may start.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for this session. It has been wonderful listening to all speakers, and it's been really amazing. We, on behalf of Mariang Jingkiengjri team, as well as Sirvetu Bari Jingkiengjri Cooperative Society Federation Limited, are here present about Jingkiengjri cultural Meghalaya. The very act of, say, making a bridge is also to be intergenerational when we are talking about the Jingkiengjris, where the latter generations tend to bring evolution in their approaches in their concurrent surroundings. And every community member would have a different nature of engagement with various constituents of their habitat system. It is very much evident from different morphologies that have been by a community, implying roots of cycle species. Some look like a span bridge, some resemble gateways, and others like a stairs. And therefore, it is extremely interesting to note that all these diverse morphologies are called one name, that is Jingking, where king is meaning to carry, and together it is called as a bridge. Therefore, the variation of activity involved within dynamic relationship of growing community member has an aspiration which is lying as a common to the entire set of villages that are there. Next slide, please. This is a representation from our side of the cultural landscape of Jingkiengjri or Yuksam. It is observed that the tribe has long been finding their ways of living in the dense tropical forests of the region. And this is a result of a constant development of their perceptual skills. These skills have emanated from their understanding about the specific environment which they are created in. And these skills further have certainly let the people delve deep into observing as well as connecting with the behavior of other elements which equally constitute the environment. And hence, Jingkiengjris are an evident manifestation of people's sensitivities and feelings which have continuously been shaped by their real-time experiences. Now, such experiences have been attained by the tribe upon an oriented conduction of their lives in these forests. And therefore, it can also be stated that these people from the tribe are truly sentient beings, and that the Jingkiengjri or Luchirai cultural landscape are a predominantly cultured component of what can be called as a sentient ecology. So it is just not a bridge that we are talking about. It is also about the production of lives, the generation of livelihoods, the lands that it is connecting, and the interaction which it is initiating between the humans as well as the non-humans. It is a representative of the connection that these people have had all through the centuries and how this has passed on from generation to generation. Next slide. Significant attributes with Jingkiengjri. So as I said, that we do not see this bridge as a bridge in itself, but it is an amalgamation of various factors that are hidden. Some are seen, some are not seen. So these are the bonds that have developed over time and generations. And so it is imperative for us to note the amount of time which is involved on the part of humans in the formulation of the Jingkiengjris. And this intergenerational phenomenon denotes active engagement of people with the Jingkiengjri. People from the tribe do not consider themselves as a separate entity from their environment, and further they revere the non-human constituents such as trees, forests, which accounts for a grounding principle of their ontological dwelling as well. Now, the character of time which is spent with humans seems no different from the one spent with non-humans. And this is evident from the time length of generations that have been devoted to and with the Jingkiengjris in the making. An increased length of engagement would lead to fine-tuning of their perceptual awareness about the properties of the trees, property of the ficus tree and its roots. And this would open up the possibilities in which people of the tribe could call for their actions. So the kinds of activity being entailed has involved the people of the tribe to remain in touch with their non-human counterparts of the environment, including the roots of the ficus species. And hence, an active sharing of daily life has resulted into clear intimacy between people and the Jingkiengjris. This sharing can be rendered as no different from the relations brought up in their families. And such space over which they are fundamentally dwelt in is also reflected from certain other activities or varieties of engagements with their environment as well. For example, in the first picture in the current slide, we see a lady, her name is Kong Blair, standing with a local, it's a pod which is called as Nope. And they spend more than a day and a half to prepare a local cuisine from this. The other picture shows us a medicine being applied on leg of a person. And this comes from a very deep engagement, the botanical awareness of the people. How do they know which plant, which part of the plant is being used, and what are the combinations of certain plants that they use to make so medicine? In a similar manner, it is very interesting to note how people are so sensitive towards, say, the texture of leaf. For example, in one of the villages, they use the back of the leaf to clean their wooden floors because the texture of the leaf tends to be very rough, and they have identified it for a certain purpose. So these instances certainly stand for an investment which people have done by spending time with non-human constituents. And this has led to formation of relations, say, by sowing the seeds of care, attention, and developing feelings. Therefore, we can say that a well-spent time with the constituent environment, humans as well as non-humans, has lent a proximate orientation to their ways of life and to the Jingkiengjris. And that is why Jingkiengjri or Luchirai cultural landscape does stand to have an outstanding cultural value. It is something which is living, it is something which has been, and it is something which is still a living testimony to the touch, the feelings, the formations being given by the various members over generations after generations. Next, please. So this present slide shows the journey of our team which approximately began around the year of 2013. And I would like architect Sanjeev Shankar to please take over in order to explain how this all began.
Good evening, everyone. Am I audible?
Yes.
I would like to thank the organizers and my colleague, Ms. Vidisha Barwal, for this opportunity. Briefly, we want to thank also Professor Nalini Thakur for inspiring us to evaluate our journey over approximately last 9 years and contribute to this discourse about conservation in Northeast India. The first phase of this journey, in fact, the earliest memory of this subject goes back to 2005 when we were in Nagaland in Konama, and the word Living Root Bridge came up. But continuing from where Ms. Vidisha left, it's an English terminology, and what we were mentioning, that language is really important here. So the earliest reference in English was somewhere around 1841 to 1843. But the local community in the Khasi language, which is an oral tradition, uses Jingkiengjri, Liushrai, and the dialect keeps changing from village to village. We have recently discovered the term Dongkong also. So the first few years for me personally was driven by the catalyst of the bridge, which is living. And that phase in the last few years has changed after discovering, and with the validation of the UNESCO team also, that this constitutes a cultural landscape. It's a combined work of nature and man, where you have a lot of tangible, intangible, biocultural aspects absolutely interwoven and integrated, which challenges us as ICOMOS, us as contemporary educationists, architects, heritage professionals, that when we say cultural landscape and when we work a lot with communities, in fact, many members we are working with from the indigenous community are right now listening to us. They are part of this Zoom link, and hopefully you will hear them speak. Primarily because we want to challenge the way heritage conservation is done and approached, both in our country and other countries. And we want to share with you and inspire and provoke everyone to rethink how we work as professionals, because our ultimate objective is conservation. But that may not mean what we think it is for a community which is actually living and is the primary stakeholder. So the first 5 years, we discovered a lot of challenges and a lot of overlaps and opportunities. We saw that there are different agencies at work, there are different stakeholders, whether funding agencies, government, and most importantly, indigenous communities. And what happens when they don't talk to each other? What happens when there are significant gaps between worldviews which clash, which don't come together, even if we may nod our head and say yes, but eventually the potential of the subject of the discourse is not realized because we haven't tapped into the real ideas which are at play. So that is the phase you see from 2013, 2018, going to 2019, when nearly 140 community dialogues were held between 2019 to mid-2020 with more than 5,000 participants. The government of Meghalaya suggested the idea of cooperatives to look at heritage economy, to look at equitable development, to look at deep participation and scaling up of conservation. Slowly, as we discovered that there are many villages, we found that this idea can inspire revival of traditional systems, but also innovating them in the contemporary context. And finally, we had the opportunity of funding through World Bank and various other agencies, currently under the CLEMP project, which is Community-Led Landscape Management Project, where specific conservation activities, which are totally driven by communities, were initiated. We were also highly concerned about the idea of bringing money and how much money in a system which is essentially driven by reciprocity, by cooperation, by voluntary spirit. So these were very important concerns which have driven our team, which have made us learn a lot through the process. So this is a brief timeline showing you where we are and how we are approaching this process. In 2022, this subject of Jingkiengjri Liushrai cultural landscape has been officially included in the tentative list. While this is undergoing review, we wanted to briefly touch upon this, that the category is cultural landscape, and the three criteria which it was included under the tentative list is 1, 3, and 6. One, essentially because we all believe that this is perhaps the highest form of human nature interaction in and near the wettest region on Earth, prone to extreme landslides, flooding, and even earthquakes. Specifically from a nature-based solution standpoint, this is a breakthrough. And specifically from bridge design and construction standpoint, though the typology is not limited to bridges alone, we have ladders, we have platforms, we have soil and landslide erosion structures also. What my colleague alluded to in terms of the name, there's deep intelligence in the word Jingkiengjri. You have the material, which is the Indian rubber tree reflected in Jri, and you have the idea of the bridge, which is reflected in the word Jingking. Criteria 3, from a cultural landscape point of view, extends the attribute beyond the typology of the structure itself. You have various indigenous Khasi, Jaintia, tangible and intangible traditional manifestations, which highlight the deep intelligence, observation, and imagination of the community. You have sacred groves, which has been spoken about. You have the construction of various stone-based interventions here, dolmens, cairns, various ossuaries, dating back to perhaps 5th century BC. And at least 2 millennia as per scientific evidence based on recent scientific papers. We are also looking at criteria 5. We have some very important breakthroughs from a land use standpoint, which we are articulating and testing, because now the area is spanning more than 3,000 square kilometers. Criteria 5 essentially is talking about the indigenous ecotheandric aspect of living with nature, but in absolute harmony, which we feel can go with the other criterias here. From an authenticity and integrity point of view, we want to highlight that all of this is being documented with community support. We are working with indigenous communities, so free, prior, informed consent is a major concern for us. Meghalaya has a special status under the Indian Constitution as part of being indigenous context under the 6th schedule. And from authenticity point of view, specifically oral tradition becomes a very important aspect to be covered, which also reflects how our team has grown from an individual. Slowly, we have had more members join in. So dominantly, we do feel sustaining the nature-based, cooperation-based, reciprocity-based, and indigenous belief-based approach is absolutely sacrosanct. And that is very important to continuously discuss with the community and ensure how we can handle it as these fragile ecosystems get exposed to the outside world. Few of these sites are known and are popular with tourists. Many of the others are not. So we are at a critical junction with all the scholars present in this community, how we can approach this in a systematic, science-based and community-based manner. Integrity, of course, we are looking at including all significant attributes and associated processes, but mostly we are concerned about the health of the species here and the entire surrounding habitat, terrain, and landscape. Which brings us to the main aspect of protection and management. We want to highlight our own journey of learning first and then extending traditional methods of protection and management for a system which can work today. So what our team has done, the Jingkiengjri team with the indigenous communities, which is now spanning 44 villages, 24 cooperatives, is to learn how they feel what constitutes protection, management, monitoring. So we try as much as possible to take English word, but then turn it and learn the Khasi or the Jaintia word and nomenclatures, the practices, and then extend them here.
Okay.
And the innovation around cooperative-based development and the idea of extending boundaries. So we are going beyond the site, the village, the watershed, And the cooperative affords us to even go beyond to the block and the district level. From a protection management point of view, we are taking insights and learnings from a range of scientific and social scientific fields, including sociology, anthropology, archaeology. We have ecology, botany, and zoology, which is interconnected here from a ficus standpoint and pollination standpoint. And we also have the challenge with landslides. So we are working with geologists also. I would like to invite, if possible, any of the community members who are spread out in remote villages, if they can hear us and talk over the next 3 slides about the work they have done in the last 4.5 years. Babante Padu, can you join us from Kashait village, please? If this doesn't work, we will continue. Babante?
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay, thank you to everyone. Good evening to everyone here. So this is a slide that you have seen there. That as Sir Sanjeev has explained, that we have 24 cooperatives in the Sarwatu Barim Mariam Jingkiengjri Cooperative Federation. And in this last 3 or 4 years that we have working together as the federation, we have done a lot of work regarding one is the conservation work. That what we are doing here is that you have seen the slide that there are living bridge here, and each and every one of us, we are working together and we are stitching the bridge to strengthen the bridge, and this conservation work was done to strengthen our bridges in each and every cooperative that we have done, and so that these bridges will be survive for the next many years. That since we have done this type of work through many years before, but we are very thankful to the government for the supporting they are supporting us to work regarding this bridges. Another work that we have done is that we have seen here, there is a stone signage which is done by the Kashait village Mariam Jingkiengjri Cooperative Society, and this is done in the necessary that we are using to growing seed plant, and there are many types of plant that we are growing here, but most of the plants that we are growing in this nursery is that rubber fig tree. And another plant that we are growing here is that there is a jackfruit plant and many other plants that we are using here. And another slide, you have seen that there is this picture shows the work from Kashait village that we have done. There is a pond here which we are created only with the clay, the soil, and stone, and we never use here the cement. We don't use cement, but we use it by the materials and we receive from the material itself. And another bridge that we have seen, that there is a living bridge that we are trying to conserve. We are trying to, from the cooperative, trying to conserve this bridge. And another picture you have seen there is that we are created a natural home, or a hut which we are created with only the materials we are used and we are getting from the nature itself. We never use any plastic. We never use any nails or any other things that we never use also cement. But what we are using is that we use the stones to we use only stones and other tree and plants that we see from the nature itself. This is a stone signage that was done by the Budinjat Longshua Mariam Jingkiengjri Cooperative Society, in Slavlok. Another slide, please. This is also the picture of you have seen. There is a kinds of basket, or there is a kinds of container that we are using to grow plant, grow seeds in this picture. You have seen that we never use plastics. And another picture is that you have seen that there is a Jingkiengjri, a rubber tree plant, and also there is one bamboo. What you have seen here is that we are using to feed the rubber tree roots so that they can become stronger and stronger. Also, we have seen that there is a lot of that we are doing from the cooperatives, and the main three works that we have already done is that the conservation work for the river village, or the Jingkiengjri, what we call in Tasi, and the second thing is that we have done Ying Mariam, or a nature home, and the last thing also we have done is a nursery which we are growing rubber tree plants and other types of crops in this nursery. Another job also we have done, that we are trying to promote the livelihood of the people by doing what we are trying to marketing the creativity that they are trying to, by the local people, to make a cup with bamboo only, and also we are using to market the honey that we are getting from the local people itself. This is only two things that I can share from my side.
Kublai Shibun, Babantei Khongsit, I would like to thank community representatives. Just a brief insight into the way we are working. He has joined us from a remote village, and English is not their first language. And yet we felt including them in this conversation today is absolutely important, because without that, we do lose out on a voice, and especially from the indigenous community standpoint. So I will just conclude the last few slides as time is short. One of the things which we realized while speaking to Professor Nalini was the very potentiality of Northeast India and the challenges which are here, and how has our team, the Jingkiengjri team, now with all the 24 cooperators, with more than 500 registered members, how have we learned, what have we discovered, and how can other people interested in this subject take these learnings and apply it to their context, whether in India or outside India. So I decided to include this picture from 2005 from Nagaland to open up this beyond Meghalaya also. We feel that there are significant gaps between indigenous thought, worldview, identity, relationships, and other prevailing systems. Whether these systems are funding processes, government processes. And so we are so thankful for this opportunity over the last few years to work within the system and try to contribute in creating awareness and change with all the stakeholders together, because we feel we are in it together. And the challenges of time, money, language, geography will remain. And when we work with heritage and traditional knowledge, it's highly subtle, and it's evolved over centuries, and it's highly intelligent. So it's very humbling for our team to learn, live with them, make mistakes, and learn again. So despite the impact of new technologies and exposure to other cultures, we have the big challenge of individualism, commerce growing a lot, and the fact of misuse also of knowledge and practices. So how does our team become a bridge? So our approach has broadly, if we consolidate over the last 9 years, we experience and we believe in living with the communities. In fact, in our office, at any given time, you will find people from the community living here using workstations which we use. And it is absolutely important that we dissolve these boundaries and create these bridges between these worlds. To learn an indigenous way of life is important, and respecting and imbibing those values within our team is absolutely important. And after that phase of living, learning, then comes the phase of co-creating, where we feel we are now nurturing an equitable ecosystem for creating deep awareness and sensitivity. And only after that do we come across the idea of innovation, because we feel innovating without learning would create a big disjoint again. So, and in the process of innovation, we often look at contemporary challenges, whether how we responded during 2 years of COVID in Meghalaya was a big learning lesson for us. And how do we give leadership and absolute authority and ownership to the community? It is their decision of joining and participating in this vision of UNESCO World Heritage Site nomination, their decision of doing protection and management plans. And I have, on this slide, I have ended with this word Shlem Jingtip. We are initiating this vision of creating a space for learning, which is not a closed room, but actually from an indigenous learning standpoint or cognitive and pedagogy standpoint, it is the entire forest, it is the entire village, it is all the people who live there every minute. So this is our team, which we feel is part of this journey, and we have made mistakes and we have learned ourselves. So the diagram on the left is the Jingkiengjri team, and you can see how these bubbles had very strict boundaries. Scientists work differently, professionals, indigenous communities are separate. And then the government is often, because the priorities are so severe on that context. But over the years, we realized that when we pollinated our team, like Ba Bante, who's listening, there's Ba Van Pintigan, there's Ba Bursen, Ba Kimista, Ba Mohan, when we dissolve these boundaries, and these agents of change, they move between our team, between scientists, between community, and they live with us, it starts creating a context for change and real growth and real development. So this is our first insight. Our second insight was that the cooperative-based model has a great opportunity, because you're looking at heritage economy, you're looking at money which can be, can impact if done responsibly and positively. We have a system of audit, we have a time and tested system across the country, and in fact, the very idea of cooperative is part of UNESCO Intangible Cultural Heritage. Northeast has not worked so much on the idea of cooperatives, but in our journey, it takes a long time for it to be explained. But after that, there is a lot of value in it from a long-term sustainability standpoint. In our case, because it is spread across at least 72 villages, from a protection, management, consistency point of view and funding point of view, we felt that this model has a lot of value. So now with 24 cooperators, and we constantly ask them, because there are a lot of challenges with literacy issues, communication issues. So we translate everything into the local language, and we try to imbibe it. So how can we go from the village block to now the state level is something of great value in this model. And finally, we wanted to share one or two images from this idea of dissolving boundaries, this idea of living, learning, changing with the community, for the community, and letting them take ownership. In this image, you see people from the cooperatives, the entire village here. You see members from our team, Jingkiengjri team. You also see scientists from national institutions, from BSI, ZSI, GSI, FRI, SET, Ahmedabad, and they all are together in it. And we feel this is important that we create this. We felt that these three images would contribute to and provoke everyone in the audience to think of new, innovative, novel alliances for sustainability. How can the communities themselves map their own terrain? They document their own ways of life. They monitor, and we don't have a separate monitoring team from outside monitoring each and every bridge or cairn or ossuary or the traditional stone route, connectivity routes, or the sacred groves. And finally, how can the community take decisions for responsible development using vernacular methods, using their own materials, which is being done for centuries. So we felt this image on the left is actually a person who has taken a little microscope or a lens from a BSI senior scientist from Uttarakhand, and they formed their own friendship and partnership. The image on the right is a mapping workshop being led by our colleague Ba Obedson, and you can see how the community themselves are mapping the boundaries. And the Kong in the middle, she is narrating her own life story, which is absolutely integral to our idea of weaving intangible and tangibles together. With that, I come to the last slide of how, for our experience and our journey, this separation between tangible and intangible is absolutely untenable, we feel. And most heritage contexts have a very, very deep intangible source which has nurtured the tangible. So the motto of the entire cooperative is these 5 words, which is part of every conversation we have. Often we have disagreements, and we go back to this motto. So we wanted to conclude with this motto, which is these 5 words. And this is our entire team over the last 5 years, and it's still growing. With that, I would like to conclude and thank everyone for listening. We have gone over our time limit.
Thank you very much. I would first like to thank and welcome the Khasi community representatives to this webinar. Thank you for talking to us and showing us this work, which is the output of the community and so many other people who have engaged in that area. Thank you, Architect Sanjeev. With this, our presentations for the day are over. I would now request Architect Surya Narayan Murthy, who is the co-coordinator for NSC Cultural Landscapes, to I think, anchor the discussion. We are now open for questions and any discussion points, any observations regarding today's event from the participants, including the speakers who want to share something. Mr. Murthy.
Yeah. Thank you, Architect Shubhru. I think it was very well connected presentations throughout, from the beginning to the last presentation, and especially the last one from the site where the work is happening. So first of all, before summing up from my side, I would like to request Dr. Satish or Dr. Sanjeev, any of the speakers, if they want to have a view or some discussion line, so that we will move forward in summarizing the whole webinar. Dr. Satish.
Thank you very much.
I would also request the participants to type their questions in the chat box. Sorry, please carry on.
Yeah, thank you very much, Professor Murthy, and also all my colleagues. I really enjoyed the last session as well, because I belong to Meghalaya. So for me, I'm quite familiar with the nuances that are being expressed by the stakeholders from the village itself, and also in terms of understanding the framework. So many congratulations to the team for doing this wonderful work. I think it is an exemplar that we need to really manifest. From my own experience of looking at what's happening in the West, I would say that this should be a material for people to study, to evaluate, to reflect. And I would be very happy to support anything that you want to publicize, because I think it's important for the nominations that there is a recognition globally as well for the work that's being done at the grassroots level. So many congratulations. In terms of looking through, and as I said, I don't want to preach to the choir, as I always say, because there are people who are invested in their time and knowledge and experience over the years. All the team members have done this fantastic work. But just picking up some points that I mentioned earlier, that the spiritual element of cultural heritage is very important to be able to recognize that language plays a huge role in the cultural heritage. So Northeast stands apart from every other part of the rest of India in terms of the language diversity. So how do we make sure that the language diversity is integrated into the cultural landscape? And I think the last presentation brings that point very clearly in terms of what I really strongly believe in. And also looking at the Nara documentation, understanding the role of cultural and spiritual landscape. The other point which I thought which is also important and came out of Dilip's own presentation, Dr. Sanjeev's presentation, was the fact that when you look at the diversity of heritage, both tangible and intangible, I think really important to recognize the significance of understanding how the tangible and intangible heritage come together at some point in time. But recognizing the historical differences, as I said, the pre-Aryan and the Aryan is really important to recognize. And of course, what happened after the 18th, 19th century, with the incursion of East India Company thereafter, there is a lot of change that has happened. But sometimes we forget that even in the existing societies and communities in the Northeast, pre-Aryan materials are still circulating in their own way, completely indigenized. And I think that is something which is really powerful, but I think we sometimes forget that there is that element that we really need to resurrect and make sure that that is part and parcel of our focus as well.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
So
I think you have summarized a very important point and also brought this complexity and the diversity that is required to be understood in handling, and the very well demonstrated by our Sanjeev and Vidisha Barwal's presentation. And we need to recognize this language diversity and spiritual diversity that it has, and also resurrecting the conceptual understanding, the indigenous understanding is very much important, especially in this part of the land in India. Yeah, Dr. Sanjeev, would you like to mention?
There is one important issue in heritage matters. It is the community which is considered as custodian, not the architect or the professionals. And in Northeast, it is very prominent that the community plays a very important role. So the heritages have survived and they have been protected and promoted by the community here, which is not known to the outside world. And what Satish has been highlighting a lot, the spiritualism and the culture are so embedded here that it integrates the intangible cultural elements with the tangible one very nicely. One example is that living root and sacred forest. Everything is sacred here. Nature is very, very sacred in the Northeast. So the concept of preservation and conservation is very much there. It is integral in the society. So the conservation architect doesn't have to toil much here. That is my feeling.
I think that is what even architect Sanjeev also has mentioned when he mentioned about the management is beyond the boundaries. beyond the boundaries, and emphasize that community-centric management, because it is inherently, it is the management identity, perception, learning, everything has to be with the, and by living with the community, one can handle this appropriately, more appropriately. That is what is the realization he had mentioned. Yes, and this is even now further emphasized by you, Dr. Sanjeev. Yes.
Murthy-san, can I just add one more point?
Please, Dr. Ramesh.
Having done some more, having done some reviews for the ICMOS as an expert reviewer, I also want to just put this in the context as well, that with climate change, most of these are under severe threat. So mindful about the fact that future generations may not have access to these sites as well, because a lot of changes are happening globally in terms of the planetary levels. So climate change is a big issue impacting on all of these cultural heritage and traditions over a long period of time. So areas which are highly, in the sense, most vulnerable in that context is really important to recognize while we are preparing any dossiers for the World Heritage Site, but also emphasizing that as I started, what is indigenous about this particular cultural heritage? We need to hammer home this point at a global level as well, that this is very much indigenous, but also has a broader appeal to the global community.
I think that is a very important point, that is recognizing vulnerability in the context of climate change that is happening all over the world. And we are already witnessing in India also the climate change impacts, especially in the ecologically sensitive areas, and where the community is already living, and the whole habitat is due to the community. I think that is the most important point. And another point you're making is this is required to be made part of our the processes of this documentation and nomination dossiers, whatever we are preparing. We need to acknowledge the character it is going to be presented and acknowledged. Yeah. Is that what you're trying to?
Yeah, that's right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes. And,
I would just like to come in.
Yeah, Vidisha,
Yes,
would you
sir.
like to say something? Yeah,
Yes,
please.
adding to what Dr. Satish just talked about, he said about the climate change. So I would just like to share a very basic observation that we've had from the field in Meghalaya, from one of the villages. It lies in the Gentias. The name of the village is Kangla. So we had spent nearly 2 weeks in that village, going through the bridges and everywhere. And in our approach, as rightly explained by Sanjeev Shankar also, that we keep on interacting with the community all the time, and that is the way our project is community-led. There are certain observations that we've always tried to take from the standpoint of the people. How were the things when they were young? How were the things when they were kids? And we made sure that in most of the villages, we try to interact with the people who are, old, who are really elder. We've met people who are beyond the age of 80 and who are able to recall that how were the things when they were, say, 10 years old, 20 years old. When was the first time that they really touched the bridge, or when was it that they came to know about certain things, or when was the thing when they came to know about the roots? So all in all, in those conversations, there was this point when we also came to know that how the landscape has changed because of climate change, which has led to change in the cultivation patterns in Meghalaya as well. So all of us must have heard about the mandarins, which used to come from Meghalaya. And it was in this village that people, one of the very young person, I think he's almost my age or so, he said that when he was a kid, he was the one who used to carry the basket of oranges for trade. And it's just been, say, 15 years or so that he doesn't do that now. And when we speak about this thing with the elders who are above 70, they would not use the term climate change because it's a very new term in the current age. But the way they described things, we were so able to relate that it is because of the changes that have taken place, and the cultivation pattern has totally changed now. So there are barely any oranges that are being grown now in the region. So it's very interesting when we are trying to focus on the cultural landscape, as we discussed earlier also, that this is just not a bridge, but it's actually a manifestation of so many things that are coming along. And everything equally continues to, talk to us about the community, how they've been and how they are continuing to grow. So very important point about climate change has been mentioned by Dr. Satish. And yeah, so just sharing one of the key observations in the similar line. Yeah.
Yes, Vidisha, I think Dr. Satish also has mentioned something at the end that what is actually acknowledged by community also has to be looked at what will be universally appealing, what will be the universal value. That also has to be very carefully, because in the light of, as you're saying rightly, that they may not be using the word climate change, but they are acknowledging this already. They are aware of what is happening to their ecology and surroundings. They are well aware of it, as you pointed out in your study. What is universal value also is required to be recognized. Now, can we have some line of observation from Kritika, who has talked about the unique typology of the Northeast, especially Assam, the Satras. Kritika Mohan.
Yes. So actually, so my intention was when I was giving the presentation. So this is actually one of my story that when I have initiated this thesis on the Barpeta Satra, I've been faced so many times during my academics that Satras are only based in Majuli Island. So this is why actually I wanted to break a stereotype that Satra is not only available in the Majuli Island. It's a part of Assamese culture. And this is actually abundantly available in the entire part of the Assam, including West Bengal as well. And also when I looked into the Barpeta Satra, I got to see a lot of difference between Majuli and the Barpeta group of Satras, starting from their functions, their management systems, their architecture as well. Wherever I did not mention because of due to the constraint of time. But when you see the spatial planning of Barpeta system, we had a Assamese vernacular system called Dakar Bosan. That is how we plan the earlier vernacular houses. When I gone through a detailed research into it, I compared the Dakar Bosan with the Barpeta Satra precinct. Then I found it is exactly following the vernacular principles of Dak. He's a scholar. I mean, it's part of our oral history, although. So I saw a lot of things which are not being mentioned in the research paper as well. And also what I felt through that in the Satra, there are a lot of documentation, extensive study has been done in the part of ICH. But what I have understood from these studies that if you don't include the built part of it, the moment you lose the built heritage or the built system or the special planning system of the Satras, you will similarly started losing the intangible values within it. So supposedly today, if I'm going to change the entire space system or the architecture of the prayer hall, their daily sitting arrangement, their daily prayer services, how they used to pray, or the place where they used to dance. So everything is entirely going to change. And this is also from the people perspective. I saw extensively in Barpeta that when we study, often we do not include the Satra settlement. because Borpeta is one of the one and only Satra which has a larger number of Satra settlement. So there you will get to see extensively, like the devotees are so inclined towards the Satra that they're still able to maintain that kind of legacy. And the young generation also, what I got to see over there, they're still maintaining their primary occupation. Although few have disappeared in the womb of time, I can see my generation is putting up their own primary occupation as present occupation. I met so many people who were earlier jewelers, they were weavers, they were craftsmen, they're still maintaining the same tradition as today. But during the womb of time, they may not get a platform to showcase all this, or some few people are, because of economic issues, they are going to some another occupation. And also the last point I would like to say that since this is actually one of my concern, what I felt as an architect, that the recent development in the Bordua Than, which is the first Satra developed by Sankaradeva. So the way they have put up the image of Satra is totally different from the Satra spatial system. So I think we need to look upon that when we look into the intangible values also. So there has to be a study with the relationship between the build typologies along with the ICH, because these things works together, this thing goes together. So we cannot skip one or either. So this is why I have put across that I just wanted to say that the Satras are it's available in the entire Assam and West Bengal. And Satra we have to see is an entity because it holds a lot of cultural tradition. So it's not only about Majuli. These intangible values within the Satras and the significance are gives importance to the Sami society. So we need to embrace what we have. I think this is the high time to look upon the Satras, because nowadays I see that the modern Satras or the older Satras which they wanted to demolish, or they got a development fund, and now the modern Satras came up, but they don't give you the essence of the Satra institution. So that is what I wanted to say.
Okay, thank you, Kritika. So I would like to summarize and move towards almost the closure of our webinar.
Dr. Rima Huja has raised her hand.
Yeah, please.
Thank you, Surya. I'm afraid I missed some of the presentations today, but what I have got, I am again overawed by the amount of information documented. And I realize, along with everyone else, how much all of this information from the northeast of India needs to be brought into public discourse and put there. And, I realize the uniqueness of it all. I also want to share my anguish at the way the WHS system works at present, where there is a lack of, despite everyone doing their work, there's a lack of understanding about the vastness of India and how much more there is to record, to have made into World Heritage Sites. And so therefore there is this short-sightedness. No matter how much hard work is done to bring to the public eye and the professional forums information that needs to be documented, saved before it is too late, including, just the point where Kritika was talking, and before that, Dr. Satish. This is a uniqueness, but there is, along with it, this awareness that it is going very fast. Sanjeev said the same thing. I see what happens at the World Heritage side. There is, for me, as I said, anguish much more than disillusion about lack of their understanding of the uniqueness, not just of this part of India, but globally also. Very often we come across this whole discourse of how our way of looking at conservation, our way being generically Indian, pan-Indian, is different to say XYZ. That is the whole point of humans. Our mind races beyond where our physical bodies can go and where physical boundaries that we can cross. And all of that is human endeavor that needs to be brought forward, whether it is the differences and the uniqueness within the Satra system or the different ecologies that we want to be saving. I don't have an answer to it. I just wanted to add here that I am so impressed by the amount of hard work that has gone on, and the fact this is the second, it might be the third, but I think it's the second of the series that is coming in this collective, the Northeast Zone, the cultural landscapes, intangible cultural landscape, theology, philosophy.
I think we've lost her. She's not audible.
Thank you.
I think I'm about to lose contact, so I'm going to stop speaking. Thank you, Surya. Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Rimaji. I think it was wonderful. You have also mentioned the uniqueness and that is required, especially in the World Heritage recognition system and within India also, from the mainland monument-centric approach to this kind of what the team of Vidisha, Sanjeev, and from the Living Root Bridge example, how they have demonstrated the ecological and acoustics model, where we learn through the community and understand and present to the community. That is very much emphasized, and they have also integrated this community presentation with the team of Bonte and Kongsit, who made their presentation, which is emerging as there has to be a multidisciplinary ecological and acoustics, culture, geography oriented and ethnography oriented, a multidisciplinary traditional knowledge systems method is very much essential, where our ethnographer Dr. Devjyoti Das has very rightly put it. Traditional belief systems are closer to nature. These are the words used by him. So what we understand from nature and the examples demonstrated in terms of representative potential World Heritage sites by Dr. Sanjeev also demonstrates that it requires completely a nature-centric traditional knowledge system oriented approach when we are handling heritage, be it management, be it learning, or be it surveying, be it working with or living with this heritage. And all the speakers, Dr. Satish, Dr. Sanjeev Barkakoti, and Dr. Devjyoti Das, Architect Kritika Mohan, Architect Vidisha Bharwal, Architect Sanjeev, and from the community, Bonte Kongsit, and many other members, the entire team of ICOMOS India, and National Scientific Committees. I thank all the speakers and participants for attending this program, and we will take this message forward in communicating with concerned authorities through ICOMOS India. That is our plan in future, and I request Subru Gupta to declare the closing points of this.
May I just take 2 minutes just to, there is an observation shared by Mr. Shankar Krishna Das. So while we have done some discussion, this is actually just the beginning of discussions. There is something talked about, which is the tea industry heritage. So basically there is a layer of colonial heritage as well in the Northeast, which also is unique. especially in terms of the typology that has been mentioned. Also, I personally wanted to talk about, it's not strictly related to the theme of potential, but I want to talk about the role of professionals, because we are the facilitators. We may like to be part of the community and we work very closely. And then we are the bridge actually between the community and, the World Heritage nomenclature or whatever. So we have to really do our jobs well to bridge that gap. Otherwise, this thing about, going from local to global, we'll never be able to achieve, right? So having the right techniques, the tools of documentation, how to present information, and essentially doing our jobs properly is, I think, of utmost importance if we really want to transition from, us knowing and then the world knowing. There is a huge task, a challenge in front of us. And it is us who have to rise to that challenge, because community on their own are happy and they are living and they already are repositories of that heritage. If it has to go at global stage, that is where we come in as facilitators. So if we don't have the right techniques and the right, way forward, right? That's when we may lose the path and we may not reach the objective. That's all I wanted to say. I would also like to thank the ICOMOS, the Zoom related, the technical team which handles all the, the Zoom and Facebook Live, Simran, especially, because without her support, this would not have been possible. So thank you so much. So we'll declare the session as successfully over. Thank you so much to all the participants and organizers. Thank you.
Thank you, Shubha.
Thank you.